She looked me in the eye, smiled, and said, "Lucas cries around old people. No offense." And just like that, in front of my whole family, I was banned from holding my own grandson. I'm Evelyn. I'm 65. I baked cookies for that barbecue. I showed up early, and I left feeling like I didn't belong in my own life. But what they didn't know, what she didn't know, was that moment. It lit a fire in me I hadn't felt in years. Have you ever been made to feel invisible in your own family? Like love had an expiration date? Tell me below. I'm listening. Because this isn't just my story. It might be yours too. She said it like she was commenting on the weather. Calm, smiling, cruel. The air was warm with charcoal and conversation, the kind of lazy afternoon that used to mean something. I'd spent the morning baking oatmeal cookies, Lucas's favorite. At least they used to be when he still had 2 naps a day and I was allowed to hold him. I wore my favorite floral blouse, the one Claire once said made me look soft, and I carried the cookies on my mother's ceramic tray, hoping someone would remember that I was still here. Rachel stood by the picnic table arranging napkins like they were exhibits at a museum. Michael hovered beside her, nodding distractedly at whatever she whispered. Claire scrolled her phone near the cooler. Richard was at the grill, flipping burgers with the same distracted precision he used for 40 years of Sunday lunches. Lucas toddled near the sandbox, one shoe already off. I took a breath, walked over, smiled. "Would you like me to hold him while you eat?" I asked. Rachel didn't look at me right away. When she did, it was with that polished calmness she'd mastered so well. "Lucas cries around old people," she said, picking up a paper plate. No offense. It was the way she said it, like she was diagnosing a cough or warning someone about dairy. Kind, logical, dismissive. No one said a word. Claire looked down at her phone. Michael's lips parted, but nothing came out. Richard flipped another burger. The sizzle covered the silence, but I felt it. Thick, sticky, like barbecue smoke inside my lungs. I smiled, a tight, practiced smile. "Of course," I said, turning slightly. Wouldn't want to upset him. I walked back toward the house, cookies still in hand. No one stopped me. Inside, the air conditioning made my skin prickle. I placed the tray on the counter, its soft ceramic thud louder than it should have been. I walked past the photos lining the hallway. Baby Claire with pigtails, Michael on prom night, a younger me with a perm and eyes that still sparkled. In the powder room, the mirror didn't lie. My reflection looked faded, not sad, just vague, as if someone had traced over me in pencil and forgotten the ink. When did I become replaceable? I whispered. The question hung in the air like steam. I waited for an answer that wouldn't come. I used to think age brought honor. That day, it only brought shame. Later, I sat at the kitchen table while laughter drifted in through the open window. Rachel's voice rang loudest, theatrical and easy. Michael laughed, too, maybe at a joke, maybe just because it was easier than not. No one came in to check on me, not even Claire. The cookies stayed untouched. That night, in bed beside Richard's soft snores and a fan whirring with artificial calm, something inside me cracked. Not loud, but permanent. I didn't cry that night, though I wanted to. Not because of the insult itself. My skin had grown thicker than that, but because of what it represented. It wasn't the first slight, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. But this one was public. It had witnesses, and none of them spoke for me. Invisibility doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, quiet, like a curtain being drawn, inch by inch, until the room grows dim and no one notices you're still inside. I'd been fading for years, a little more each birthday, each holiday, each time someone called and only wanted to speak to Richard or ask about the kids. Lucas used to fall asleep on my chest. I would hum softly and trace circles on his back. I knew the rhythms of his breath better than anyone. But now I was a ghost with good baking skills. Rachel had always been cordial, too cordial. Her smile had edges. Her compliments often carried expiration dates. When she and Michael first married, I chalked it up to newness, boundaries, adjustment. But over time, her walls only thickened. My role shrank from mother-in-law to background noise, then background threat. I wondered if Michael noticed, if Claire ever thought, why is Mom always sitting alone? But they never asked, and I stopped offering answers. The house had once felt like mine. Now it felt like a hallway I passed through. That evening, I poured myself a glass of water. No wine. I didn't want anything that dulled the sharpness. I wanted to feel every splinter. The window over the sink framed the backyard like a stage. Richard leaned back in a lawn chair, Rachel beside him, gesturing as if narrating a parable. Michael held Lucas in his lap, bouncing him gently. Claire laughed at something unseen, one hand brushing hair from her face. It looked like a family portrait, and I wasn't in it. The fan above me clicked with every rotation. I used to be the one who arranged these barbecues. I'd prep for days, marinate, chop, clean. I knew who liked mustard on their burgers and who preferred no onions. Now, Rachel sent a group text with a sign-up sheet. I was assigned dessert. That was my title now, dessert. I stood there a long while before turning off the kitchen light. I didn't say goodnight to anyone. I just climbed the stairs, pausing at the landing to look at the family photo from 10 years ago, before Rachel, before the distance. We were all closer then, not just in inches. Upstairs, Richard was already snoring. The ceiling fan created little shadows on the wall that danced like slow-moving ghosts. I lay there, flat on my back, feeling the weight of my own breath. I had been a teacher, once, 5th grade. I used to command a room with a look. I could comfort a crying child with nothing but a hand on the shoulder. I was sharp, competent, the woman everyone called for help. But now, no one called. I was still me, wasn't I? That was the question I kept circling, like a drip from a faucet, persistent, annoying, unignorable. I didn't have the answer that night, but I did know one thing. Whatever had cracked, it wasn't going to seal again. It had let in something new. And I wasn't sure yet if it was grief or grit. Is love age-dependent or just convenience in disguise? I stopped folding their laundry. No one asked why. That told me everything. At first, I thought someone might notice. That Claire would text, or that Richard would wonder why his shirt smelled faintly of yesterday's lunch. But the laundry just sat there, unfolded, in the same basket by the stairs for 3 days. After that, it became a habit. The mornings were quiet now. I let them be. The clatter of pans, the smell of bacon, those belonged to another version of me. I stayed in bed longer, listening to the creak of floorboards as Richard wandered downstairs alone. Eventually, the sound of the microwave would hum through the walls. He never complained, not directly. I passed him once in the hallway. He gave me a quizzical glance, holding a plate of leftover lasagna. "You not hungry?" he asked. "I'm fine," I replied, moving past him. We didn't speak again that morning. Claire sent one text that week. "You okay?" I stared at it for a full minute. Then I placed the phone face down. No reply. Rachel hadn't changed. Same crisp tone, same hostess smile, but I could feel the sharpness behind her eyes, the flicker of something unsettled when she looked at me, like she couldn't quite figure out what I was doing or why it unnerved her. But mostly, the house felt still. The kind of still that doesn't welcome, only echoes. One afternoon as I returned from the store, I struggled to lift the bag of oranges and milk from the trunk. The sun was relentless, baking the concrete. That's when I heard the screen door swing open. "Need a hand, Mrs. Lane?" came a voice. It was Noah, 15, lanky, polite. He lived 2 houses down with his mom, Maria. I remembered when he was a toddler, always in mismatched socks. I nodded. "Thank you, sweetheart." He grabbed 2 bags and followed me inside. "I was just watering our front hedge," he said. "Saw you and figured I'd check." "That's kind of you," I said. surprised by how genuine it sounded. He placed the bags on the counter, then glanced at the row of framed pictures lining the wall. "Is that your family?" he asked. I nodded. "That was taken last Christmas." "You've got a big one." "Big," I said, "but not always close." He gave a little shrug, pulling at the collar of his t-shirt. "My mom says people get weird with age, but I think it's not the age. It's the excuses they make." I smiled at that, unexpectedly moved. "You remind me of someone I used to be," I said softly. Noah blinked. "Was she nice?" "She was fierce," I said, "and kind." We stood in silence for a second. Then he picked up the hose still coiled on the porch and offered to water the tomato plants for me. As he sprayed the soil, he said, "People don't see what's right in front of them, but I do." Something in my chest cracked open, not painfully, more like light finding a forgotten window. I didn't let him see me cry. I turned, wiped my cheek, and thanked him again before he left. That night, I thought about the way he looked at me. Not with pity, just recognition. If a boy next door could see me, why couldn't my own family? Later that evening, I stood in the kitchen with the fridge door open, pretending to look for something while letting the cold air brush my face. The hum of the appliance was the only sound, and I realized it had become my favorite part of the day. This moment of nothing. No demands, no conversations I had to steer carefully. Just the fridge humming and me, suspended in the quiet. Richard passed behind me, setting his coffee mug in the sink without a word. I could tell he was waiting for me to say something. The old me would have asked about his day, would have mentioned the funny commercial I saw. But I let the silence stretch. He cleared his throat, stood there for a second, then left the room. I stared at the empty space where he'd been and wondered how long he'd keep pretending that I hadn't changed, that he hadn't noticed. Maybe he truly didn't. I think that's what cut deepest. Not that they didn't see me now, but that they'd never really seen me in the first place. Not when I stayed up late sewing Halloween costumes. Not when I sat beside Michael's hospital bed at 12 after his bike accident. Not when Claire had her first heartbreak and I held her while she sobbed into my cardigan sleeve. Those moments were real, but they weren't remembered. I didn't want a medal. I just wanted to be part of the story. The next afternoon, Noah stopped by again. He brought over a bag of lemons. "They grow wild in our yard," he said with a grin. "I thought you could use them. My mom always says lemon water helps when your heart feels heavy." That made me laugh, more than I meant to. "Well, tell your mom she's wiser than most people I know." We sat on the porch for a while, sipping lemonade from mismatched glasses. The ice clinked softly, the kind of detail you don't realize you miss until life becomes too loud. "You ever feel like you're fading?" I asked, not really expecting him to understand. But Noah didn't hesitate. "Yeah, like when I talk and people scroll their phones, or when I tell a joke and no one laughs. It's like you weren't even there." I nodded slowly, eyes on the sunlight dappling the yard. That's exactly it. We sat a little longer, no rush, no pressure to perform. It struck me then, this boy with his quiet kindness had noticed more about me in 2 afternoons than my own family had all summer. When he left, I lingered on the porch, watching the shadows stretch as the sun dipped low. The tomatoes glowed a little redder, the breeze a little kinder. For once, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt seen. And that scared me. Because if being seen was possible, then being ignored wasn't fate. It was a choice. And I was done choosing silence. What if invisibility isn't about age, but about permission? I didn't mean to overhear, but I stopped pretending not to. It was one of those late summer evenings when the air hangs thick with memory, the kind that makes your skin feel too tight and your thoughts too loud. I was outside by the hydrangeas, hose in hand, the water soaking into the thirsty soil. The kitchen window was cracked open just a bit, and I was close enough to catch every word slipping through. At first, I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when I heard Rachel's voice, tight, careful, oddly urgent, I froze. "I just need a little loan, okay?" she said. "Don't make this a thing." Michael's voice followed, uncertain. "How much are we talking?" "Not a lot," she replied too quickly. "A few thousand just to tide us over, and don't tell Mom, please. She wouldn't understand." The water dripped from the hose onto my sandal. My hand was still on the valve, but I wasn't moving. The sound of those words, "Don't tell Mom," landed like a brick. She was hiding something, that much was clear. But what gnawed at me was the familiarity in her tone, like this wasn't new. I shut the hose off quietly. The plants had enough for one night. Inside, the house buzzed with the faint echo of dishes being cleared, a drawer sliding shut. I moved past the kitchen like a shadow, neither seen nor acknowledged. Later that night, Noah dropped by. He had come to return a book I had lent him, a collection of poems I used to read before bed. We sat on the porch again where the air felt safer, looser somehow. "There's something wrong," I told him. "I heard Rachel asking Michael for money." Noah leaned back, hands behind his head, legs stretched out. "Like, in a sketchy way?" "In a practiced way," I said, "like someone who's used to getting what they want without questions." He frowned. "She always seems polished. But I guess that doesn't mean much." "No, it doesn't." The porch light above us flickered once, like a nervous blink. It felt like a signal. I didn't confront Rachel, not directly. That wasn't my style. Not yet. But I started threading the idea into conversation, softly, like a note hummed under my breath. "Rachel seemed tired lately," I mentioned to Claire over tea the next morning. "I wonder what's keeping her up." Claire paused, cup halfway to her mouth. "She has been secretive, now that you say it." I smiled faintly, letting the silence carry the rest. These weren't accusations. They were invitations. Invitations for the truth to find its own way into the room. That evening, as I folded a dish towel, I kept playing Rachel's voice in my head. Not the words, but the tone. How it wavered just enough to reveal panic. That kind of panic doesn't come from a single bad week. It comes from something longer, deeper. Was she in debt? Gambling? Hiding something from Michael? Or all of us? I didn't know, but I was going to find out. The next morning, I took longer than usual in the garden, pulling weeds that didn't need pulling, trimming stems that weren't overgrown. My hands needed something to do. My mind, more than that. I kept thinking about Claire's expression, the way her eyes darted after I mentioned Rachel, like she had noticed something but hadn't wanted to name it. There's a power in subtlety, I've found. Not everything has to be shouted to be heard. Rachel showed up unannounced that afternoon, dropping off some hand-me-down toys from Lucas. She stood in the doorway, all effortless grace and crisp perfume. "I figured you'd like these," she said, gesturing to the bag at her feet. "Thought Lucas had outgrown them." I smiled, shallow and polite. "Thanks. I'll find someone who can use them." She paused, waiting for me to ask her in. I didn't. Her eyes flicked toward the living room and then back to me. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice just a tad too bright. "Fine," I said. "Why wouldn't it be?" There was a flicker of something across her face. Recognition, maybe, or fear. Then she adjusted her posture, chin high. "Well," she said, "let me know if you need anything." She didn't mean it, and I didn't pretend to believe her. When she left, I stood at the doorway a moment longer, staring at the space where she had stood. I used to feel small when she spoke to me, like an unwanted relic in a house too sleek for memory. But now, I felt something new blooming inside me. Not anger, clarity. Later, I picked up the phone, hovered over Claire's name, then Noah's. I didn't dial. I needed more time, more truth. That evening, I found myself rereading old journals. I came across a line I'd written during the year Michael left for college. "Everyone grows up and grows away. You just hope they look back before you disappear completely." I traced that sentence with my finger, the ink smudged slightly from where I must have cried on the page. Rachel hadn't looked back, not once. It was time I started moving forward, with or without them. The next day, I saw Claire again, this time at the market. We both reached for the same bag of apples and laughed. She walked with me a while after that. "She's not herself lately," Claire said, unprompted. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. "Rachel, I don't know. It's like she's always covering something. I thought I was imagining it." "You're not," I said softly, "but sometimes the truth takes its time to land." Claire didn't reply, but I caught her glance sideways at me more than once as we walked past the cereal aisle. That evening, sitting on the porch alone, I wrote a list, not of grievances, but of moments. Ones where I had known something was wrong and had said nothing. It was a long list. At the bottom, I wrote just one word: enough. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming space I had willingly given away. I looked out across the yard as Noah approached, waving. "You okay, Mrs. Lane?" he asked as he climbed the porch steps. "I think," I said, "I'm finally getting there." And I meant it. If they weren't going to protect me, I'd protect myself. What's more dangerous, a lie spoken or one tolerated? She thought I'd stay quiet forever. That was her first mistake. There's something unnerving about watching people decorate a house they've emotionally vacated you from. The kitchen buzzed with clatter, the kind that came from too many hands doing things without coordination or connection. Claire was taping balloons to the archway with a soft smile that didn't reach her eyes. Richard moved between the patio and the grill like a man checking a box. Noah hovered helpfully, positioning chairs in neat little rows under the backyard tree. Rachel, as always, was the picture of composed motherhood, except for the way her knuckles whitened each time the tape tore wrong. I stood near the window, teacup in hand, watching it all like a guest who hadn't been invited, but showed up anyway. I hadn't helped plan this birthday party. I hadn't offered my usual list of supplies or volunteered to bake the cake. No Evelyn's famous deviled eggs. No banner designs, no suggestion of party games. And no one had asked why. That omission said more than words ever could. Claire caught my eye briefly from across the room and offered a slight nod, but said nothing. Even she didn't ask. Maybe she already knew. It was only when the guests began arriving that the tension in Rachel's shoulders tightened visibly. Her eyes scanned the kitchen, then the hallway, then back to me. She didn't like the silence. "Funny," I said softly to Claire as she brushed past me with a bowl of chips. "How quickly I became optional." Claire didn't respond, but her pause said everything. I moved through the house like fog, present but untouchable, a ghost with unfinished business. Rachel waited until the first round of gift wrapping rustled open and the backyard laughter was in full swing. Then she cornered me in the hallway, near the linen closet. "You're poisoning this family," she hissed, her mouth a practice smile for anyone glancing over. I didn't flinch. "No," I said, leveling my gaze. "I'm disinfecting it." Her lips pressed together, sharp as a blade. "What are you trying to do?" "I'm not trying," I said. "I'm watching, waiting, and choosing my moment." Her breath caught. "You think you're clever? Just because you stopped playing house doesn't mean anyone misses you." "I never said they did." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "But you should have kept the receipts." She blinked. "What?" "You know what I mean." I walked away, my pulse steady, my hand wrapped tightly around the small envelope in my cardigan pocket. Michael had left his blazer slung over the banister near the front room, a casual gesture, careless, trusting. I slipped the envelope inside, an innocuous-looking cream rectangle. Inside, a photocopy of a bounced check drawn from a shared account Rachel swore was under control. I hadn't gone digging. It had landed in my lap quietly, almost like fate. I didn't need to say a word. Let the paper speak. Let guilt do its work. Back outside, Rachel was once again the hostess, smiling too wide, pouring too generously, eyes darting too fast. She looked more like an actress fighting to remember her lines than a woman celebrating her child. Richard flipped burgers with a distracted rhythm, burning the edges while looking everywhere but at me. Noah approached with a plate in hand. "You didn't eat," he said gently. "I've had my fill," I replied, "just watching the fire." "The grill?" "No," I said. "The other one." He nodded without asking. The sky began to change color then, burnt peach fading into charcoal. Smoke from the barbecue drifted lazily through the yard, curling in the breeze. But that wasn't the only thing in the air. It was fear, and she knew it. The illusion was cracking, and everyone could feel it. No one said it aloud, but they knew something had shifted, and they couldn't unfeel it. Inside the kitchen, the birthday cake sat pristine on the counter. 3 tiers frosted to perfection, with Lucas's name in bold blue letters. I stared at it for a moment longer than necessary. I'd always been the one to make the cakes, every birthday since Claire's first. Now it stood like a monument to replacement. Claire returned with a fresh bowl of lemonade, her movements too quick, too practiced. "Need anything, Mom?" she asked, almost automatically. "Just watching," I said, my voice calm. She hesitated. "You sure?" I nodded, but I could tell the question had already begun to echo in her mind. Why wasn't I helping? Why wasn't I in the kitchen, elbow deep in frosting and ceremony? Later, as the sun began to dip behind the trees, I found a moment alone. I stepped into the small laundry room, quiet, cool, and removed. I rested my hand on the washer like it was something sacred. This had been my world for so long, folding, sorting, quietly serving. And now? Now I was done asking to be seen. Rachel passed the doorway and did a double take, clearly startled to find me there. "You okay?" she asked too loudly. "Perfect," I said with a polite smile. "Just reminiscing." Her eyes flicked to the folded towels beside me. "Oh." She left quickly. Claire caught me again before dinner, her brow furrowed. "Is something going on?" I shrugged, "Just thinking about old laundry." Claire didn't laugh. Instead, she stepped closer. "You said something earlier about being optional." I didn't respond. "I never thought of you that way." "You didn't have to," I said softly. "No one does until we vanish." She looked at me then, really looked. I saw it hit her like a slow-rising tide. As the party wound down and people filtered out with sleepy toddlers and empty casserole dishes, I remained seated beneath the patio light, hands folded in my lap. Lucas toddled past me, chasing a balloon, oblivious to the invisible war that had begun to fracture the family's foundation. I smiled at him. He didn't smile back, but he didn't cry either. That was enough. Rachel collected trash nearby, shooting me side glances like I might erupt at any moment. But I wasn't going to. I didn't need to. I had already made my move. And tomorrow, when Michael put on his jacket and found the envelope, the silence would finally speak. He wouldn't say anything right away. He'd show it to Rachel first, ask questions she wouldn't be ready to answer. And then, well, the truth doesn't need much room to breathe, just a crack. And today, I had made one. "You thought I wouldn't find out? I was here before you even arrived. Control is only power until someone sees through it." The fairy lights strung across the backyard swayed gently in the evening breeze, casting soft gold halos over half-empty cups and discarded paper plates. Conversations floated like low music, distant, disconnected. Somewhere near the fence, a child giggled at bubbles drifting into the dusk. But none of it reached me. I stood just beyond the porch light's reach, fingers curled loosely around the rim of my glass. My eyes scanned the gathering like a stage I'd watched 100 times. Same faces, same dance. Except tonight, the script had changed. Michael laughed politely at something Claire said near the snack table. Rachel hovered at his elbow, too close, too still. Her smile never quite reached her eyes anymore. She looked tired, not the kind that sleep could fix, the kind that came from building too many lies too carefully for too long. "Noah," I said quietly. He turned toward me from his place near the patio steps, where he'd been helping stack chairs. Yeah? Stay close. He nodded once, the understanding unspoken. Then I stepped forward. Michael, I called, keeping my voice even. That envelope I left in your jacket, don't open it now, but do open it, tonight. His expression tightened slightly, confused but alert. Claire looked over, her brow furrowed. Rachel's smile cracked just a hair. Still playing martyr, huh? She said too brightly, stepping closer. Honestly, Evelyn, I thought we'd agreed not to make scenes. I tilted my head. Number U agreed. I simply went quiet. Her eyes narrowed. What is it this time? Another lecture about respect? About how things used to be? Don't you ever get tired? I do, I said. That's why I stopped pretending. Claire's eyes bounced between us, her mouth slightly open. You always want to be the victim, Rachel said. You've made a whole personality out of being pitied. No, I replied calmly. I'm just finally refusing to be a ghost. There was a beat of silence. The music hummed behind us, something light and forgettable. Then Claire stepped forward. Is it true? She asked Rachel. You borrowed money and didn't tell anyone? Rachel's mouth opened, then shut. Oh, come on, you're really going to believe her? You're avoiding the question, Claire said. Rachel's voice spiked. You think she's trustworthy? She can't even hold her own grandson. The air froze. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered against the edge of the patio, the sound splintering the night, and I stepped into the silence. You didn't want me near Lucas, I said, each word deliberate, steady, not because of my age, but because I see through you. Rachel blinked. Her mask slipped just enough. You've worked so hard to look perfect, I continued, but people like you can't stand being seen, not really. So you made me small, convenient, unthreatening, but I've been watching. Michael looked at her then. Really looked. Mom, he said slowly, what's in the envelope? Rachel's jaw tightened. She's trying to sabotage us. I shook my head. Number, I'm giving you the chance to stop sabotaging yourselves. Rachel's voice trembled now. You don't belong here anymore. I stepped closer. That's not your decision to make. You married into this family. I built it. Her lips parted. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out, heels clicking sharply across the flagstones, posture perfect even in defeat. The yard fell into an uneasy quiet. Claire exhaled shakily. You were right. I didn't reply. Behind me, Noah stepped forward, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. I looked up at the night sky, so calm and wide above the wreckage. Does the truth always need shouting, or just courage to whisper it out loud? The evening didn't resume in the usual way. Conversations didn't pick up. Laughter didn't return. It was as though my words had rewired the very air, exposing wires no one wanted to admit had always been frayed. Michael moved toward the porch slowly, the envelope now a weighted object in his thoughts. Claire lingered by the buffet table, arms crossed, eyes clouded with something like regret, or maybe awakening. I sat at the edge of the patio bench, not triumphant, not gloating, just tired. It had taken everything to stay quiet for years, and just as much to finally speak. Funny how both silence and truth could cost you the same breath. Richard came over eventually. He didn't sit, just stood a foot away, hands in his pockets. I didn't know, he said quietly, not quite looking at me. I know you didn't, I answered. That was the problem. He nodded, shame inching into the lines around his mouth. I should have, but you didn't. Another silence. He looked up at the sky like he was searching for some answer it might grant him. I thought keeping the peace was the same as keeping things whole. Sometimes peace just means everyone agrees not to talk about the damage, I said, but the cracks were still there. Rachel's absence was the loudest thing in the yard now, like a song that had ended mid-note, and for once no one rushed to fill the gap she left behind. Noah sat beside me quietly. Do you feel better? He asked. I thought about it. Number, not yet. He nodded, not needing anything more. I didn't win tonight. That wasn't the point. This wasn't about triumph. It was about truth. And truth rarely feels clean or light. It's heavy, but it makes things real. And after so long being invisible, I'd take real over polite any day, even if it meant watching everything rearrange itself in the aftershock. Let them look. Let them rethink. I had stood up not to tear anyone down, but to say, I exist, I matter, and I won't vanish quietly anymore. That was enough. For now. For the first time, I didn't feel like a guest in my own life. Sometimes survival is the quiet reclaiming of a chair at the table. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window, warm and clear, casting golden squares on the tiled floor. The coffee maker hissed softly in the corner. Toast popped up, forgotten for a moment, its scent mingling with the faint traces of last night's conversations. I stood in the center of the kitchen, a place I had once ruled like a quiet steward. Now I simply stood, not as a servant, not as an afterthought, but as myself. My breath was steady, my shoulders light. There was no audience, no drama, just peace. On the table was a small, dented tin box. I opened it slowly and placed the folded letter inside. I hadn't told anyone I'd written it. I didn't need to. It wasn't for them. It was for me. I gave this family everything, the note read. All I ever wanted was to matter, and now I do, to myself. The lid clicked shut. It didn't echo, but the weight of it felt final in the best way. Footsteps padded softly behind me. Hey, Claire said, her voice still edged with sleep but warmer than it had ever been. You're up early. So are you. She smiled and stepped forward. Without asking, without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around me. We see you now, Mom. I held her a moment longer than necessary. I didn't do all this to be seen. I know, she whispered, but it's still about time. Michael came in next, slower, quieter. He didn't say much. He just gave me a soft nod and sat down at the table, rubbing the bridge of his nose like he hadn't slept. I didn't need an apology, but he gave me one anyway. I'm sorry it took so long. I didn't answer right away. I just sat across from him and poured us both some coffee. That was enough. There were no fireworks, no grand speeches, but everything felt rearranged, subtly and surely. And then, as if summoned by the light alone, Noah tapped gently on the screen door. You guys got any more of that tea you like? He asked, grinning. I think we can find a cup, I replied. We took our usual spot on the porch, mugs in hand, the lawn stretching before us like a canvas someone had just rinsed clean. The breeze was soft. The world didn't owe me a victory parade, and I didn't need one. I always liked it here, Noah said. Even before? Before you got brave. I chuckled. I don't think I got brave. I think I just got tired of disappearing. He took a sip and looked out across the grass. Either way, you're kind of badass. I smiled, eyes crinkling. Don't tell your mom. He grinned wider. Too late. Inside, I heard footsteps again. Richard. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He walked to the table, picked up a plate, and placed it in front of me. Toast buttered with just a little jam. I looked up. His eyes met mine for a second, then dropped. An apology in action. I nodded once. That was enough. The sun crept higher. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, a lawnmower sputtered to life. Ordinary sounds. But today, they felt like music. Rachel didn't come around that morning. Maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she would. That wasn't mine to control anymore. I had done what I came to do. And now I was sitting on the porch of the life I had quietly taken back. One sip of tea, one breath, one truth at a time. I didn't win anything. I just came back to myself. And really, that was everything. What if being seen starts by seeing yourself first? As the sunlight poured across the breakfast table, I didn't feel like a ghost anymore. I felt like someone worth setting a place for. No one has the right to make you invisible. Sometimes the quietest act, choosing to speak, to step back, or to stand still, can shift the whole room. We don't need permission to matter. If you've ever been made to feel small in your own family, I invite you to share your story, because your voice still matters, and someone out there needs to hear it.